Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome to the human anatomy block that we'll be covering for the next few classes. Some of the systems we'll be looking at will be the cardiovascular system, respiratory system, nervous system, skeletal system, and muscular system. We'll spend most of our time and focus with the skeletal system and muscular system, as it's most associated to exercise and exercise program development. The cardiovascular system, respiratory, and nervous system are very key, obviously, but much more in depth than what we need to focus on in the phys ed curriculum. If you continue in sciences, taking biologies, go into university in science or kinesiology or on to medical school, you will spend a ton of time on the other three. But for what we need, the skeletal system and muscular system will fill the bill. So the cardiovascular system, just a brief overview, is comprised of the heart, blood, and blood vessels. The main function is to deliver oxygen and nutrients to working muscles, and it also transports waste products back from the muscles, from the working muscles. So examples of those would be carbon dioxide and lactic acid. It also has a defense, somewhat of a defense mechanism, in that it prevents serious blood loss by forming clots should there be an injury or a serious cut. The blood is comprised of two parts, the formed elements, which include the white and red blood cells, and the blood platelets, and then the blood plasma, which is the liquid portion of the blood, which is 92% water and 8% dissolved solutes. And then as we move on, the arterioles are small arteries, the venules are small veins, the aorta superior is the main artery leaving the heart, the vena cava inferior, which is the main vein from the upper body into the heart, and then the vena cava, which is the main vein from the lower body into the heart. Again, as you spend more time in sciences, you will spend a ton of time studying the heart and all its functions. But for what we need, I just want you guys to think of arteries delivering oxygenated blood and a vein bringing waste products or bringing blood back to the heart. The respiratory system, it's comprised of your lungs and passageways, so your mouth, throat, and trachea and bronchi. Supplies oxygen, eliminates carbon dioxide, and regulates the acid-base balance, or the pH. Air enters the lungs through the passageways. The gas is exchanged at the alveoli, and the oxygenated blood was returned to the heart via the pulmonary vein. The central nervous system is the body's control center and communication network. I want you to think of the central nervous system much like what we talked about last year in the substance use and abuse block, but the CNS, or the central nervous system, is basically your brain and spine. And then the peripheral nervous system, which is the PNS, that's what you're going to include outlying parts of the body and nerves and things like that. There are a few other components to that, such as the autonomic nervous system, motor nerve cells, and sensory nerve cells. Autonomic nervous system we talked about briefly last year as well, where it's responsible for all the involuntary movements, the heartbeat, your breathing, things like that. But for what we need, again, it's a little more in depth, so we will just kind of glaze over it. There is some information in your pamphlet if you'd like a little bit more. So there's your standard anatomical skeleton, if you will, with labels on it. I'm aware that the labels are small and tough to read, but that's your standard issue picture. In your pamphlet, you'll notice you have a double, which is a front and back, or anterior and posterior, just to keep anatomical terms going. And you'll notice that all the bones are labeled with their standard anatomical name. As you go through, you'll also notice that sometimes there'll be a bracket, which on both this sheet and a worksheet you will use later on, and the bracket is trying to suggest a group of bones. So on the posterior view of your skeletal system, you'll see at the top on the left-hand column 7 cervical vertebrae. So those are the vertebrae of your neck, and they're grouped together. Okay, they all have individual C1, C2, C3, things like that. But for our diagrams, they've bracketed them, put a bracket around them to show them. So your assignment number 1, you've been provided with a blank worksheet that needs to be filled in. So you need to use the labeled diagrams provided to assist you in completing the blank sheet. Now, the one challenge you have there is the labeled diagram in your packet has both the anterior and posterior view. So sometimes, whereas the worksheet is simply an anterior view. So you may need to use a little bit of caution when you're filling it out as you go through, because sometimes it may be giving your picture a little bit of different angle. Okay, the labeled diagram will be collected at the end of the anatomy block. You guys will be handing in almost like a portfolio, an anatomy portfolio, and this will be assignment number 1 of that portfolio. Okay, upon completion of that, I would like you to choose 5 bones to research a little more. There's an interactive website that I've provided, and it'll be on the next slide as well as on your worksheet. But use the interactive website provided to answer the following questions. Okay, these key questions are: where on the body is the bone located? Okay, what is its major function? And list any other names that it has. So it's not uncommon for a bone to have an anatomical term. Okay, and then also have a common term that people will talk about. Okay, so an example would be, I'll give you one, the clavicle, which is your collarbone, but the anatomical term is the clavicle. We could typically call it the collarbone when we're not talking in terms of anatomy. Okay, this is the website that you'll be using. It's getbodysmart.com. I'll give you a brief overview of it as we go. Hopefully it loads up all right. But it is interactive. It allows you to use different, get different information, more in-depth information, and certainly more information than what you need for this course. So don't be overwhelmed. We'll select skeletal system to work. So you take the skull, and then as you go through, you can scroll over top of different bones within the body. Okay. See here how it's got upper limb bones, lower limb bones, etc., etc. Organization of the skeleton kind of gives you a big overview, but if you selected the upper limb bones, for example, and then we even look at clavicle specifically. Okay, so there's the upper limb bones of the arm, the scapula, clavicle, etc., etc. If we went to superior, inferior markings, are probably a little more in depth again for what you would need in a university kinesiology course, or possibly biology courses. You would need to know them just for the sake of attachment points, origin insertions of muscles, etc., etc. But if you just simply go to introduction, you're then able to come down onto a screen like this where it loads up the picture and shows you the clavicle. If you select on any of the hyperlinks that are, or blue links as it's labeled here, and simply click on it, the bone will give you a little bit of information that way. Okay, and then if you'd like to click on a superior view, it pulls the bone right out. Okay, and we'll spin it so you get a bit of an idea of what the curvature and also whether it's flat or round or etc. different shaping that goes on with it. As you come down, pan down a little bit, you'll notice there's also some basic information on the functions. So the clavicle functions like a strut or a lever arm to help suspend the humerus and scapula and maintain their position relative to the rib cage. If you click on functions itself, okay, you'll notice that it actually shows you the movements within it. Okay, so what I'd like you guys to kind of do is you can play around with this certainly, but I'd like you to kind of cycle through and find at least 5 bones, answer those 3 questions for each. You can answer them on any kind of document, and again, it's going to be handed in as part of your portfolio at the end of the block. And then because we'll do something similar with muscles, we'll do something similar with exercises as well. And hopefully by the end of the block, you'll be able to be completely prepared to build an exercise program as we move forward. All right, if you have any questions, I will be in the gym with the other group, and I will be poking in and out. So hopefully I'll be able to handle questions as they come in. And my plan is to try and have a portion of each class with each group so that we're able to move forward in an orderly type of fashion. All right, thank you very much, guys. I hope you have a great class.